Hello and welcome to Gary's Garage. Today we're going to be working on a Volkswagen 1.8 turbo engine from a 2000 GTI, and we're going to be doing a timing belt and water pump replacement. I'm going to go over the process of how to do this job, whether it be in the car or out. For visibility, we have the engine out today, and that'll give you a chance to see how it goes. So here we go. So here's a few things that we're going to need today to do this job. Obviously we're going to need a water pump timing belt tensioner kit. Here's one made by Habu, and inside this kit it comes with a new timing belt. It's a Conti-Tech, which is good. You'll see there's a water pump. This is a metal impeller water pump, and of course the new O-ring is already installed. There is an idler pulley with the new bearing, obviously all brand new, ready to go. And then the tensioner, which is already has the safety pin already installed. We'll get into how to use that a little bit later on. In addition to that, I also have a new serpentine belt because the old serpentine belt is not in good shape. A few tools that we're going to need: ratchet, sockets, 10mm, 13mm, 16mm. And I'm using a small drill bit to use to pin the old tensioner. We're going to need a bolt. This is not the right one. Apparently I don't have the right one, so I'll obtain that later, and you'll see it in the video. And then to make things go quickly, I use an impact gun with an adapter. So here we go, and let's see how things go. So once your car is prepped and ready to work on, that means put up on blocks, always ensure your safety, wear safety gear. One of the first things you'll be wanting to do to the car is take off the serpentine belt and the tensioner. This will help to give you the room that you'll need to work on the car. You can see here that this serpentine belt has seen better days, so that's the reason we'll be replacing it. So there are ways of doing it, but I just use a adjustable crescent wrench, and you can operate the spring. You pull towards the front of the car. If this is in the way when it's in the car, you can flip this around, put it on the other way, and now there's a little bit of a hose that gets in the way here, so it's a good idea to release it. You can do that by taking off the electrical connector, which is on the throttle, and then getting this hose out of the clamp. This will just give you a little bit more room. Get your wrench on, and then you can detension the belt. Now I can't hold the camera and do this at the same time, so just use your imagination here. The belt is off, and then you can release the tensioner. So that's step one done. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is get the tensioner out of the way. Helps when you go the right way. Okay. Off comes the tensioner. That gives us lots of room. Now, next thing we're going to do is remove the cover on the front. This cover, you have to play with it a little bit to get it off, but that'll expose your timing belt. And of course it will also show you why you got to do this job. Most people change their timing belts on mileage, so the interval that's required by the manufacturer. This one has gone far beyond, and we're just lucky that this belt didn't let go and cause an engine failure. So there we go. So the next thing we're going to want to do is there's a lower cover, but we're not going to take that off until after we take the motor mount off. But you can't take the motor mount off until the engine is supported. But before we do that, it's a good time to turn the crankshaft and align the timing marks. So let's go over that. So to make things easy, I've gone ahead and cleaned the area around the timing marks and used my paint pen to make a small mark on the right where the notch is on both the pulley and on the cover. Up on the pulley on the camshaft, you can see there's a little notch there, and there's also a little notch on the housing, which is part of the valve cover. So when you're setting this up, it's important when you're lining them up to look straight on the end of the camshaft, and then because if you're looking to the side, it could look as if you're one notch off. So make sure you're lined up with your vision so that you can see that those notches are truly lined up. And so you can see that this engine is already lined up. I did this before starting. But I have a little, this is a 19 millimeter 12 point. So you can always turn clockwise. You can tell there's some compression on this engine, which is a good sign. So as we turn around, and the timing mark just went past. And we're getting close. We'll be compressing number one. And slowly, there we go. Let's get some light in here so you can see. There we go, lined up. And again on the top, looking straight down the cam, you can see that those are lined up. It's very important that that these are lined up. Obviously, if the timing belt gets back on off one tooth, your valve timing will be out of whack and the car won't run, an engine won't run properly. Or if you're off by more than one, if you're off by two or three, you could have some contact between the valves and the pistons, and then you would destroy something. So we don't want to do that. Make sure we get it right when we do this. Okay, let's get on to the next part of this. This is where you need to support the engine. So if you're on jack stands, you can support it with a jack or another jack stand underneath the motor, because what you're going to be doing is removing your motor mount on this side to get access. You can also use a bridge that goes across your engine bay. I have one up there. There's my bridge. But we obviously don't need it because the engine's out. I'm doing this engine swap, and it doesn't make sense for me to swap the engine and then do the maintenance. I'm going to do all the maintenance first and then do the engine swap. So let's move on to the next aspect of it. All right, so now we're going to remove this motor mount. When you're in the car, you'll have to remove the bolts that connect the part that's on the car to this part that connects to the engine and the interface, so they'd be able to free this up. So there are 3 bolts holding this on into the block, and they are you need a 16 millimeter socket to get at these, and so let's get these done. There's one down the bottom. Okay, that's it. Okay, there we go. And that comes away. Okay, so the next thing is that you can start seeing the components of the timing belt. You can see the tensioner, and you can also see the idler and its bearing. So now we need a 10 millimeter socket. Let me just grab that. To get this cover off. There's 3 bolts, 3 small bolts holding this on, and we just spin these off. that allows you to take this cover off. So there we go. So now we're getting closer. So the next step is to remove the pulley. So while you're removing the pulley, this obviously is our timing mark. We want to make sure that the pulley doesn't move, so you're going to want to support it while you're taking these bolts off with an Allen key. So let's get going with that. All right, so we've these bolts obviously haven't been out for a while, and I'm going to try and do this so that you can see a little bit. So I've got my little stool set up here, and we'll get the camera sitting here so that you can see. And hopefully with a little bit of luck, we can get this to crack. Oh, there we go. Now, problem being is the setup I've got here. I can't do that. So what I'm going to try and do is hold it with my knee here, and see if we can. There we go. Now this is moved off the timing marks, so I'm going to return it to the alignment. Check the top. Okay, we're good. So now we can spin these out the way they're supposed to be. And voila, there we go. So there is a locating pin on this pulley, and in this particular one they've got two locating holes but only one locating pin. So what I'm going to do before I set this aside, I'm going to mark that with my pen. That way I will not get this mixed up when it's going back on. There's the mark. There's the pin. Alright, now we can set this aside. So the next thing we're going to be doing is removing this cover plate. And this cover plate, you probably notice, also has the timing mark on it. So in a sense, essentially we no longer will have a place to know where the position of the crankshaft is, and hence we don't want to move this. So what we're going to do is we're going to mark this once we get this cover off. So here we go with that. Hang on. All right, here we go. Quick and easy. And there we have it. So now we have access. So this is the time that we do an inspection, and what we're looking for is whether or not there's any leaking from the main seal. And because if the crank seal here, this would be the front crank seal, if it is leaking, this is a really good time to change it. You won't get a better time. The way these are designed, there's a little notch at the bottom here. Any oil that would leak out of that seal, it's designed to drip right out and out of the car and not actually get on the belt. That's what you don't want, because that could shorten the service life of this belt. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to work on is getting the tensioner out, and we'll give you that detail. Okay, so I've had a little root around and with the rag, and there seems to be quite a bit of, well, not quite a bit, but there is some oil mixed in with the dirt at the bottom of this timing belt case. So I'm going to replace this seal, this front seal on the crankshaft. So I'm going to have to work to get this nut off, but I don't want the engine to go out of timing, so I'm going to leave the belt on until this nut is loose. I've gone ahead and used my paint pen, and I've marked this tooth and this rib on the engine to maintain my timing if in case the crankshaft turns while I'm trying to loosen this nut off. So still, we got our top timing mark still lined up good, so we're good, and we can return it to that position even if I turn it, getting this nut loose. Okay, let's get ready to get this done. All right, well, that took a little bit of doing, but we managed to get this bolt done. I had to get myself a 19mm 12 point, which I didn't have, and I had to use an impact wrench and a little bit of persuasion and persistence to get that loose. So now that this is loose, but everything is still in place, belt's still on, it's all tied up. Now it's time to get the belt taken off. So I still don't have this M5 by 65 mil bolt, but there's another solution, and if you can get this charge pipe, that's the one leading to the intercooler. If you can get this out of the way by unbolting the brackets, and you can swing this out of the way just a little bit, lift it up or whatever, you can actually take the pressure off the tensioner with a C-clamp. Let me set that up and I'll show you how that goes. Alright, so what I have here is a 3-inch C-clamp. Nothing special, just a standard C-clamp. And what I'm going to do is position this so that the screw is down, and this covers the top of the tensioner. And with a little bit of work, even if the motor's in place, you should be able to do this from the bottom and get your hand up in there, get the clamp positioned correctly as best you can, and then when you're compressing this, it's a slow process. Here, let me just adjust this and I'll come back. So I find that that you may need to steady the clamp while you're turning it, because it has a tendency to move, and if it moves, it may move out of position. So it's good to do that. Now, when you're compressing the tensioner, it's a combination of spring and hydraulic system. So if you try to go too fast, you'll discover there's a lot of resistance. So, but if you just pause or go a little slower, you'll find it actually gets easier to turn. And so as you turn it, the piston will collapse and get in so that you can put this pin in. So I had a drill bit set out earlier for doing this, but once I really actually got doing it, I found that I had a pin from a previous job. Well, there was my clamp. Hang on a sec. Yeah, so there we go. So we've got the lever arm pressed all the way down, and now the pin slides all the way in, and now we can release the clamp, and then we can take the tensioner out without there being any pressure on the bolts or whatever. So okay, let's get going on that. There's 2 bolts holding it in. That's a 10mm. The second one is under here at the bottom. That bolt out, and now the tensioner will just come out. And you'll notice now that the idler, which is really part of the tensioner, has an eccentric cam sort of arrangement on it, and so as you press it up, it tightens the belt, then it goes down and gets loose. Okay, so now we're going to get our M8 Allen key, and we're going to take this out here. I've already loosened this, so it's not really a problem. Sorry about the camera work here. spin that out, and there we go. And the belt comes off right away. So there's no fighting the belt. You can just, the belt should just come off easily, and therefore you're not moving any of the pulleys that are in. So there we go. So now I can unscrew the bolt at the bottom, and we can do an inspection of that seal. So this comes off easily, and if you look inside, there's a little flat spot. It's like a key in a way, and there's the keyway slot which locates it, so it only goes on one way. So if we get the light in here, you can see there's a little bit of dirt and oil, but if you look closely at the seal, it looks like there's no oil coming out of it. So that leads me to think that if I really take a close look inside here, I can find that there's traces of oil going all the way up to the valve cover. And if I look here, I can see that there's been a relatively recent valve cover replacement, valve cover gasket replacement. So no doubt that was leaking, that got serviced, but they didn't take this apart to clean it. So I feel that what I'm going to do here is just clean this up, and I won't need to replace this seal. Of course, it's a personal preference. If you feel that, you know, for the $5 or $7 is going to cost to get the seal, just get the seal and pull it out and replace it. The seal in this cover does come straight out, and then you can install the other one. So it can be done in place. You don't have to take this lower cover off. That becomes a big job if you do it that way. But there we go. So I'm going to clean this up, and then we'll get to putting everything back together. Well, there we go. It's a little bit cleaner. There's still more cleanup to do in the motor, but the area on the inside where the timing belt's going to go is nicely tidied up. So now we're ready to take this old water pump out. It's not leaking, or there's no problems with it, but it's part of the kit, and it's a preventative maintenance to do this. There is a date code on this, and it looks like 08, which means, and this is a 2000 car, so it looks like the timing belt job was done previously in 2008. So we'll pull this out now. Even if you've drained all the coolant is still going to come out when you take this water pump out, because the way the cavities are inside the passages, there'll be a little bit of coolant in there. So be prepared with a rag or something to catch it. Just don't get it in your eyes or anything like that if you're doing this from below, although this is normally what you would do from above. All right, okay, I'm going to crack these. I need both hands to crack them, and then we'll buzz them out. Okay, a rag in place. These are cracked, so let's get these bolts out. There's 1, 2, 3. Now, this held in with a O-ring, and because it hasn't moved in a while, there's a really good possibility that it's going to need a little bit of coaxing, but it's designed with these areas here that you can pry. There's one at the bottom and one at the top. So I'm going to get a screwdriver here, and we'll pry this out. Shouldn't need too much effort, just to get the light under there. So you can see what I'm doing. Sorry about that. And so we can go back and forth prying. There's another one on this side here. This is obviously a job that's much easier with 2 hands. And at some point, you'll be able to pull it out, but not yet. So you guys get the idea. I'm just going to grab a different pry bar, so I can do two at once, and that should make it go a lot easier, and then I'll show you pulling it out. Well, there we go. And there's the amount of coolant that came out. So now I got a little cleanup to do here, so I'm going to get this done before it gets too far. Okay, with that cleanup done, we should now be able to get the rest of the pump out. Obviously it's come out more on one side. There we go. And there it is. So obviously it was a good metal impeller pump. The O-ring is intact, and although you can tell it's now flat instead of round, which is a normal process as they age through temperature cycling. So what we're going to do is we're going to clean up this edge so that it's nice and clean. That way when we put the O-ring in with the new pump, it will actually seal properly, which is important. Okay, so I'll get working on that and we'll come back and show you where we are. So I finished cleaning up the opening for the water pump. I used a scrub brush, or a brush that won't damage the surface here. It's made out of plastic, and I had quite a bit of cleaning up to do, surprisingly, and I have to suspect that the previous job, someone used a little grease on the O-ring to install it, and the residual grease has, dried up and burnt itself into the block. So that had to be, it was all turned hard, so that had to be scrubbed off, so made clean again, so that O-ring would slide on very easy. And I didn't want to damage the surface. There's still a little bit of residue, but that's under the surface of the cast iron, so not a problem here. So we can just put the pump in. So here's our new pump, and there's our O-ring, which is nice and round, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is put a little coolant, because that's all you want to do to lubricate it. Is you want to match the fluid that it's going to be protecting the leakage from. So I'm going to need a little two hands to do this. I'll try and make it so that you can see. So I do this on the... Alright, accidentally turned it off. Alright, so we're just putting a bit of coolant around the O-ring, making sure we get it fully covered. Then we'll put that aside, take some of the coolant, and we're going to wet the surface of the where the O-ring goes. Sorry, that's a little better. So we've got that wet up, so that now that O-ring will slide in there without causing any binding or any damage. So get it lined up the way it's supposed to be, and here's back to the two-hand problem here again. Get one of the bolts in. Get the other one. And then you can start turning them in. I've got a little thumb ratchet on my 10mm drive. And this is where you want to do it evenly all around. You don't want to cockeye this and damage that O-ring. It should slide in pretty easy. You shouldn't need a lot of torque. If you need a lot of torque on your drive here, the O-ring is binding up on something, and the best thing to do in that case is to back it out and start over. Inspect the O-ring, because if it is damaged, you'll need to replace it. But this is going in nice and easy. It's almost fully seated. There we go there. There we go. Good. So now that's on, I'm going to get the torque wrench, and then we'll torque this up. So the torque rating for this is 11 foot-pounds or 15 Newton meters. My torque wrench is set for 15 Newton meters. I've got it in inch-pounds and in Newton meters, so I've got it set for 15. So this is another one of those jobs where you can't really hold the camera and do this and hold the torque wrench properly. It's a two-handed job. But the idea is that I'm going to just get them a little further snug, and then I'm going to torque them to the proper amount, and then we'll move on. Alright, so with the water pump now installed and torqued, I'm going to reinstall the pulley for the timing belt on the crankshaft. So I'm going to make sure that that flat spot lines up with our key slot on our shaft. And there we go. It's pretty easy to do. Spin that in. I'm going to refrain from tightening this until the belt is installed again. Make sure, we can make sure that the belt is lined up with the timing marks and so on. And so once that's done, you can then, you're not afraid that this is going to move and, you're going to damage your engine or anything. So we want to get that, we'll hold that until the belt is on. So the next part is that we're going to install the idler and the tensioner. And so we'll get that set up, and away we go here. Okay, so now we're ready to install the tensioner and idler assembly, and those are two pieces. So here's our new idler roller with the tensioner arm on it, and it comes with a new washer. Make sure you use that new washer, and then orient the pulley like this before you install it, and it bolts into the head. Should just spin in there without any difficulties. There we go. There we go. That's in position. Now we can just turn that up. We could torque it at this time, but I'm just going to go ahead and continue with this, and we're going to just install our tensioner. So here's our new tensioner, and it has the spring clip, our retainer, still installed, and set it up the way it goes in. Get the bolt started, and this one's underneath. And then we can spin those in, and that fits down like that. Now the next step is I'm going to tighten this up, and then we're going to install the belt. So here is our new belt, and I've checked it against the correct part number. It's Continental. I'm going to orient the belt in its natural position, similar to the form that it's going to take on the engine, and that may help us so that we don't have to fight it so much. And this is, of course, a part that again I need two hands for, so I'm going to see the best I could do to get it going here while you can see. So I'm going to move the light over here, and just what I'm trying to do here is just get it into the right position of what I need. I still have my tensioner loose for a couple of reasons. One is to get this belt on properly. It's a little bit of a faff, but it should be okay. You can see that to get it tight from the top to the bottom, you have to put a little tension on it. So doing that, what ends up happening is that this tensioner gets in the way. So we want to feed the belt on first, and then we'll get this tensioner on. This gives you a lot more room to work with. Well, I'm gonna need both hands, so pardon me. I'll see if I can just prop the camera up there. It's not going to be the best. Alright, so what I did is because there's a lip on this idler, I put it over the idler first, and then I've put it on the crank pulley. So as we tension this manually, now we can check our marks, and the top one's okay, but as you can see, the bottom one is not. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to index this properly. So let's see what we can do to get this done. So I'll tell you what, you don't have to see me doing this. I'm going to do it, and then we'll continue with the job. Alright, so basically I've got it on. So being able to spin the idler to its least tension position allows you to move the belt on properly. And then I was able to get it across this. There's a lip here. I got it across this, and then because there's no lip on the crankshaft pulley, I was able to slide that on in position, and that was fine. Then I went to install the tensioner, and you need to put the bottom part in first and sort of press up in this direction, putting a little pressure. Of course, you got to move this up to get it underneath the plunger, and then once that's in, you can put the second bolt in there, and that just spins in. Okay, so checking our marks, you can see that our lower mark is very close to being lined up, and our upper mark is also lined up properly, just as it was before, looking straight down the camshaft. All right, so but this is slightly different, and this would explain the difference in the condition of the belt. The old one was obviously stretched a little bit, so this marking point was slightly over, but it's a fraction of a tooth position. You know, just maybe one degree on the on this crank pulley compared to where it was before. So moving it one notch one way or the other would make it further off. So this is the correct position. As it breaks in, as this belt breaks in, and we add the full tension on it, it will eventually end up in the correct position. Okay, so there we go. So I'm going to just torque these bolts in, which are also 15 Newton meters, 11 foot-pounds, 15 Newton meters, and make sure that the belt is all set in the correct place. I need to just scooch it in just a little bit on the bottom there, make sure everything's good, and then I'm going to pull the pin, as they say, and then we're good to go. And then we'll rotate the engine through its rotation. So here we go. All right, so I've double checked to make sure that we're all lined up, and I've got my wrench on this, and so we're going to start turning the engine around. So the idea is to turn two full rotations. It's a good thing this engine has good compression. We've gone past the first revolution. Get a little bit of chance for the compression to leak out. And we come up on the timing mark. So we look down the camshaft at the top, and then we check against at the bottom, and you can see that now those marks line up the way they're supposed to. And I did overshoot just slightly. Yeah, that's lined up just perfectly, looking down the camshaft. And this is lined up exactly the way it's supposed to. So there we go. So just to button up, I'm going to torque this main nut, which is a bit of a bother, but we'll get that done, and then reinstall the covers, and that's job done for the timing belt, water pump, and tensioner. For those paying close attention, you may have noticed that I didn't pull the pin before I rotated the engine through at 2 full turns. So I've now taken the pin out, and I'm going to repeat my turn through. Okay, so I've turned it through. Once again, our cam marks are straight up and down. Our crankshaft mark is straight up and down. I've now torqued the nut, and everything else is torqued in place. So we are good to go to put the covers back on. We'll start with the lower cover. So here is the finished product. So the serpentine belt tensioner's been reinstalled, the motor mount's been reinstalled, although this is temporary because we need to replace those bolts because they're torque to yield bolts, and I don't want to do that until we're putting the motor in. Everything else is buttoned up. We've marked the timing belt service interval so the next person knows when it was done, so there's no guessing, and we're all good to go. So job done. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this segment of Gary's Garage, and hope to see you on the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.